All right, let's jump right into this, shall we? Is science actually the enemy of theism? Like, are they locked in some eternal cosmic battle? Or is that really just a cultural myth we've all kind of been sold? Welcome back to The Explainer. Today we are going to completely dismantle some long-held assumptions and explore the genuinely fascinating intersection of scientific inquiry and theological belief. We're going to draw heavily on the work of Dr. Jim Spiegel to see if these two heavyweights are actually at odds, or if, they might just be best friends in disguise.
So here is our roadmap for this explainer. We'll start with the classic science versus religion debate. Then we'll look at the lenses of science, expose science's hidden assumptions, clarify the rules of the game, and finally we'll wrap up with the ultimate plot twist.
Okay, let's get into section 1. Science versus religion. Are they inherently opposed?
Now, you hear this all the time. It's called the conflict thesis, and it's championed pretty heavily in modern culture, especially by new atheists. It's this idea that you basically have to choose. You can be scientific or you can be religious, but there is no way you can be both. Proponents absolutely love to point to historical moments, like the Galileo controversy over a heliocentric universe, or the rise of Darwinism, as definitive proof that science and religion are locked in a strict zero-sum game. But before we just hand over the trophy and declare a winner, we really have to look at a massive pitfall in this modern skeptical approach, and that is scientism. Scientism claims that all valid knowledge absolutely must be empirically verifiable through science. Now, what's really wild about this claim is how incredibly fast it falls apart. The statement, all knowledge must come through science, literally cannot be proven empirically in a lab. It totally fails its own test. It's completely self-refuting.
On the flip side, though, people of faith sometimes fall into their own trap, the God of the gaps mentality. This is basically the view that religion merely exists to explain the leftover mysteries that science just hasn't quite figured out yet. The fatal flaw here, of course, is the assumption that a single event can't have both a valid scientific explanation and a theological one working totally in tandem.
So, if they aren't inherently opposed, are they just entirely separate? Well, the late Harvard paleontologist Stephen Jay Gould certainly thought so. He proposed the independence thesis, famously calling it non-overlapping magisteria. Fancy term, right? He essentially argued that science handles the physical realm and religion handles the spiritual and moral realm, so they literally never touch. But according to the source material we're looking at, this fails too. Why? Because the scriptures frequently speak on topics like cosmic origins, human nature, and historical events. And all of those are properly subject to scientific inquiry. The realms actually do overlap quite a bit.
And that brings us to Dr. Spiegel's preferred framework, the interactive model. In this view, science and theology are actually just different theoretical approaches trying to interpret the exact same reality. Dr. Spiegel points out the true genius of this model. When conflicts pop up at the theoretical level, they're wide open to mutual correction. Sometimes theology exposes a flaw in a scientific theory, and, you guessed it, sometimes scientific inquiry refines our theological interpretations. It's a two-way street.
All right, to really understand why these conflicts even happen in the first place, let's move to section 2, the lenses of science, paradigms and perceptions.
We have to talk about paradigms here, and this zoo analogy is just perfect for illustrating the point. Picture this. A creationist and a macroevolutionist walk into the exact same zoo. They are looking at the exact same data, the literal same animals. The creationist looks at a giraffe and just marvels at the incredible variety designed by God. The Darwinist looks at that very same giraffe and marvels at the sheer power of natural selection and random mutations over eons of time. They see the exact same facts, but they perceive them through entirely different interpretive frameworks.
This concept was famously captured by the highly influential philosopher of science, Thomas Kuhn. He argued that scientific inquiry is practically never totally neutral. As he brilliantly put it, all observation is theory-laden. Our perceptions of the world around us are fundamentally colored by our underlying theories. Think of it like that famous duck-rabbit optical illusion. What you actually see depends entirely on the preconceptions you bring to the image.
Furthermore, Kuhn pointed out that scientific theories are largely underdetermined by data, meaning you can't always just deduce a theory strictly from hard facts. It very often requires a huge imaginative leap. Take the 19th century chemist Kekulé, for example. He was struggling trying to figure out the molecular structure of benzene. It just wasn't working as a straight chain. Then, while he was literally dozing by the fire, he dreamt of a snake biting its own tail. He woke up, sketched out a ring structure, and boom, he solved it. Science is deeply, deeply reliant on human imagination, not just cold, hard calculation.
And honestly, that imaginative leap leads us perfectly into Section 3, Science's Hidden Assumptions, the Faith of Science.
So the absolute crucial point here is that science isn't some purely objective, standalone enterprise. To even begin doing science, you have to make massive, philosophical faith commitments right out of the gate. You must assume that your senses are generally reliable. I mean, you literally can't scientifically prove your eyes work without using your eyes. You have to assume the law of causality, that effects have causes. You must assume nature is uniform and that the basic laws of logic are trustworthy. None of these things can actually be proven by science. They are the philosophical foundation that the entire house of science is built upon.
So if science requires this much foundational faith, what are the actual boundaries of its methodology? Let's check out Section 4, the rules of the game, methodology versus reality.
Okay, we really need to clarify two terms that get constantly confused. First up is metaphysical naturalism. This is the absolute hardline worldview that nothing exists except the physical universe. No God, no souls, no angels, nothing. But then there's methodological naturalism. This is simply the ground rule that when you are doing scientific research, your accounts must only refer to natural material phenomena. See the difference? You can absolutely be a devout theist who believes in miracles, yet still practice methodological naturalism the second you step into the chemistry lab.
Now, many methodological naturalists argue that appealing to a supernatural cause during a scientific explanation is, well, essentially cheating. Dr. Spiegel shares this really funny analogy from a colleague. He says it's like a football player running out of bounds at the 15-yard line, sneaking all the way past the water coolers, and then jumping back on the field at the 10-yard line to score a touchdown. You essentially broke the rules of the game to get your explanation.
But Dr. Spiegel counters this by asking a really profound question. Who exactly made that rule? Why is science the literally only discipline in the academy that's not allowed to be interdisciplinary? Historians and philosophers borrow from science all the time, and this gives rise to what's called theistic science. It's an approach that actively welcomes theological considerations. Proponents argue that if we see irreducible complexity in biology, systems that simply could not have evolved incrementally because they need all their parts at once to even function, we shouldn't be totally barred from inferring intelligent design just because it crosses some arbitrary boundary line.
And watch how all of this builds as we enter Section 5, the ultimate plot twist, Plantinga's Concord.
Enter the philosopher Alvin Plantinga. He takes this culturally dominant narrative we've been talking about and completely flips it on its head. Plantinga argues that while there might seem to be a superficial conflict between science and theism, there is actually a really deep concord. And conversely, while naturalism and science might seem like best friends on the surface, there's actually a massive, completely fatal conflict between them.
So here is Plantinga's core argument. Science completely, 100%, relies on the assumption that human cognitive faculties are reliable and actually aimed at discovering truth. But if naturalism is true, you are forced into strict Darwinism, where our brains are just the product of random mutations aimed purely at survival and adaptability. Darwinism guarantees that our brains help us survive. It absolutely does not guarantee that our brains are geared toward acquiring objective truth.
Okay, think about it with this bizarre but honestly perfect thought experiment. Imagine a guy who develops the completely false belief that if he doesn't pay off his house mortgage by age 50, he will be kidnapped and thrown into a dungeon. That belief is completely untethered from reality. There are not kidnappers. But guess what? By age 50, his house is paid off. That completely false belief had immense survival and adaptive value. Under pure naturalism, as long as an idea keeps you alive long enough to reproduce, it doesn't matter one bit if it's actually true.
So naturalism literally strips away our confidence that we can even trust our own brains to do science. Theism, on the other hand, provides the deep concord that actually makes science possible. If a rational God created us in his image, it makes perfect, logical sense that our cognition is actually aimed at truth. Plantinga argues that theism easily explains why nature remains uniform day after day. And from this perspective, it also explains the totally uncanny efficacy of mathematics.
I mean, seriously, why does abstract human thought map so perfectly onto the physical universe? When Albert Einstein predicted how the sun's gravity would bend starlight back in 1919, he didn't even bother going down to South America to watch the solar eclipse test. When his assistant excitedly ran in and told him the observation confirmed his theory, Einstein just kept writing in his notebook and casually said, "I knew that was the case. The mathematics proved it." That kind of insane alignment between abstract math and physical reality is a complete mystery under naturalism. But under theism, it's exactly what you'd expect from a rationally ordered universe. Which leaves us with this final, absolutely mind-bending thought. If our brains evolved strictly for survival and biological fitness, just like naturalism claims, can we actually trust them to accurately discover the ultimate truths of the universe? It turns out, to truly trust the science, you might just need a little bit of theism. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I will catch you all next time.